Today on Muddybeards 4x4, we're going to get rid of this low-hanging fruit. Hello everyone and welcome to Muddybeards 4x4. I am Robbie and today I'm going to be tackling a project that quite frankly is long overdue, and that is the location of the factory gas tank on my 1999 Jeep Cherokee XJ, the trail plug. Now anyone who is familiar with the Jeep Cherokee knows that the gas tanks on these things hang down really low, and they are an obstruction on the trail and just a clearance issue in general. And for me it's an even bigger issue because of my plans for on the trail plug, which includes swapping in 1-ton axles, reworking the suspension to a 4-link style suspension, and going with a stretch. I'm going to be moving that rear axle back further than the factory position. So that gas tank is just in the way. So that thing's got to go, and I got a couple of ideas of how to relocate it. To start removing the factory gas tank, I'm going to remove the clamps that hold on the filler neck to the gas cap, and then pull down the hoses. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove the filler neck itself from the Jeep. Now underneath the Jeep, I'm going to remove the factory wiring harness for the fuel pump and the sending unit. And then I'm going to disconnect the fuel line that goes into the fuel pump. Next, I'm going to start undoing the straps that hold in the factory gas tank. Be sure to use plenty of rust inhibitor because mine were pretty rusted and it made it pretty challenging to get them loose. Now while supporting the gas tank with a jack, you can remove the straps. Just push up on the tabs and you can pull the straps down, and this will allow you to drop the gas tank. Pro tip, it's probably better to do this with a tank that's empty or near empty and not full like mine. Well, check out all this extra room back here now that that gas tank is gone. I should have no problem stretching the rear end now, and will no longer have that low-hanging gas tank to get caught on when I'm off-roading. Now with the fuel tank all removed, it is now time to figure out where I'm going to be relocating my factory fuel tank, and this is the answer inside the cab of my Jeep. And I know what you're probably thinking, but I think this might be one of those cost-benefit type scenarios that the benefit of gaining all the extra clearance underneath my Jeep outweighs the cost of losing all of that cargo space. Now this is going to be a dedicated rock crawler and trail rig. It's not an overlander and certainly not going to be a daily driver, so I don't think I'm going to miss the cargo space as much as maybe other people might. Now I have seen some people, what they've done is they cut out the floor back here in the cab right along the uniframe channels, and they're able to recess the gas tank down inside, save a little bit of room. I think you might be able to have some other benefits, like you may not have to extend, your wiring and your fuel lines and things like that. But the more I look at this for my needs, I think I'll just save the time. I don't need to cut out the floor. I think I can simply mount this thing right here. So I'm going to get started figuring out how I'm going to secure the tank back here so that it's not moving around when I'm out there rock crawling. And also I need to build an enclosure. And then I'll eventually need to figure out how I'm going to get this thing wired up with it sitting in the back of the Jeep. Now the first thing that I want to do is figure out how to secure the gas tank in the back of my Jeep, because I definitely don't want this thing bouncing around when I'm out there rock crawling. Now from the factory, these are held in with this metal strap that has a bolt with an adjustable rod, but this is just simply not long enough to mount it like this in the back of my Jeep. So I think what I'll do is take a cue from the factory and use a strap, but instead of this metal one, I'll just use this lashing strap, run it over the top like this, and then I got these little anchor points, these little luggage anchor points. I think I'll just tack weld this thing down here to the floor pan, run the strap through, tighten her down, and I think this gas tank should be held in place when I'm out there rock crawling. It's not going anywhere. Well, all right, with the gas tank now firmly secured into place, it is now time to hook everything back up. Now, there are three things that I need to look for here. Of course, you have the wiring connector that powers the fuel pump and the sending unit and all that stuff. You have your main fuel line that goes into the top of the pump here, and then you do have this breather on top of the gas tank. Now, because I mounted this thing inside the cab and didn't recess it down into the floor, I'm absolutely going to have to extend all of these connections in order to get them back into their factory locations, but that's really not that big a deal. For the wiring, I'm simply just going to cut it and then splice in, extra length of line, and I can plug it right back into the factory setting. For the fuel line, I want to reuse these factory disconnect clips here, but in between this that comes right off the fuel pump, this is just soft line. It's just simple soft line, so I'm just gonna extend it. I went and got some of this high pressure fuel line here from the auto parts store, so I'm just going to extend that out, and I'll be able to just click it right back into the factory hard lines. And as far as the vent, nothing special, just some regular old vacuum hose. Now, this normally goes into what I believe is called the charcoal canister for like emissions purposes. I'm going to be eliminating that, so I'm simply just going to run it down underneath the vehicle and let it vent out into the atmosphere. Now, I'm going to drill a hole into the floor pan of the Jeep and then run everything down underneath, and then I'm just going to use one of these firewall grommets. These things are kind of cool because they have this webbing, so it just helps seal things up a little bit better, and of course prevents chafing of my fuel lines and my electrical lines. So let's go ahead and extend these things out, get everything hooked back up, and make sure this thing still works. Well, check this out. Everything is hooked up, plumbed up, and wired in, and the Jeep runs fine. I did have a little bit of a leak right here. I think the O-ring in that quick disconnect is shot, so I probably need to replace that. Or I could, worst case scenario, just put this high pressure fuel line just straight over the nipple of the fuel pump. And I don't think that would be a very big deal. But right now, everything's looking good. I ran the vent up underneath the Jeep, and the best part about this was I did not have to extend the wiring at all. I thought for sure it wasn't gonna be long enough, but it was just barely long enough, and that hooks up, all goes down underneath into the floorboard here and wires up. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up a little bit like that, tuck it all up, and the last step of this project is to build some sort of enclosure to go over the top of this thing and protect the gas tank back here. With the gas tank now firmly mounted into place and replumbed up, it's time to move on to the final step of this project, which is to build an enclosure to protect the gas tank and to open up a little bit of a possibility of some storage. I want something flat that I can at least stack some things on top of if I need to. Now, for the enclosure, I'm not going to do anything fancy. I really just plan to build a simple box structure. So I'm going to start by using this angle iron. This is 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch. I believe it's 1/8 inch thick angle iron, and I'm going to build a base using this angle iron. And the reason why I want to do that is I like the idea of having the flat lip here. It'll give me the ability to mount this enclosure when I'm done by using the angle iron base. And as far as the rest of the box, I mean, nothing too fancy. Again, I just have some 1/8 inch thick sheet metal here. I already got it all marked out. Just going to cut it out, weld it into a nice square box, something that'll work perfect. That's going to slide right over the top of that gas tank and be a nice little enclosure to protect it back there while I'm off-roading. I really need to get a plasma cutter. Well, with a significant amount of welding and grinding, I got the enclosure finished. It's all built and sitting in place here in the back of my Jeep. And yes, the gas tank is underneath this, fully enclosed, and everything fits like a glove. Now, pretty much, again, it's nothing fancy. It's just a box. I did cut out some holes here. I know it's kind of hard to see with the light. That's for the filler neck locations. And again, I'm going to be using those grommets, those firewall style grommets to try to seal everything up. So this will go in here through a grommet and just try to limit the amount of fuel vapors coming into the cab as possible. I'm going to use those grommets to try to seal this thing up. So this thing is sitting here, and now I need to figure out how I'm going to mount it. And I think what I'm going to try is this, a rib nut. I've never used one of these before, but I've had several people suggest using this when working with sheet metal, and it's a pretty simple idea. You drill a hole, you rivet these in, and you got yourself, you know, basically a nut that's popped into the sheet metal, and I can actually bolt this thing down into the Jeep. So I've marked out the locations that I want to put the nutserts in. So I'm going to have to remove the enclosure again, drill it out. Then I'm going to remove the gas tank because I got to get this thing back on here, mark out the areas to drill through the floor pan here so I can put the rib nuts in. And I just don't want to risk any sort of sparks flying and me blowing myself up. So have to take things in and out, in and out, in and out. But things are coming together, so I'm going to go ahead and get this thing out. The hole's drilled, the tank removes, the hole drilled into the floor, pop the rib nuts in, and then I'll probably paint this thing up and put everything back in for final assembly. Well, the gas tank is back in place. All the hardware is installed. The enclosure is fully painted and fully sealed from the inside, and I have successfully relocated this fuel tank. Now, it does take up quite a bit of space, but again, you know, not much more than I'd say a fuel cell would. And so I'm pretty happy because, again, this is a crawler, and I think the benefit of gaining all that clearance underneath the Jeep is well worth, you know, the cost of losing the cargo space. Now, another thing I want to say is One of the things I was very concerned about is, you know, putting the tank inside the cab. I didn't want a bunch of fuel vapors inside the cab, so I think I've done a pretty good job of sealing this thing up as best as possible. I mean, the enclosure is fully welded. I put silicone seal on all the seams on the inside. On the lower lip here, I put some of that like rubberized weather stripping. So, you know, as I tighten it down, hopefully it seals up the bottom of it. And the only thing I'd be a bit concerned about is, oh, you can't really see it with the light here, is those grommets where the filler net goes in. But the hoses fit really snugly inside these grommets. And so I'm pretty sure that this thing is going to be pretty well sealed, and overall I'm pretty happy with it. Now, as far as the filler net goes, I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with it yet, because this whole rear end is going to go through some major surgery when I go to fit the 40s on this thing. But what I'm thinking is this is going to be here. And I'm probably going to remove this rear window, replace it with like plexiglass or aluminum or something like that, and mount the cap there. But that's going to be down the road because I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. But you know, the bottom line is all of this work was done because I got all this extra space underneath the Jeep now to start my rear axle swap. Thank you for tuning in to Muddy Beards 4x4. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you are not already. If you have a comment, throw it down in the comment section down below. And until next time, I will see you on the trail.